before the president misinformed and inflamed a violent mob who tore down the American flag and brutally beat Capitol Police officers. Madam Speaker, we must all do better. These articles of impeachment are flawed, but I will not use process as an excuse. There is no excuse for President Trump's actions. The president took an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Last week, there was a domestic threat at the door of the Capitol, and he did nothing to stop it. That is why, with a heavy heart and clear resolve, I will vote yes on these articles of impeachment.
I'm afraid injustice will prevail, but truth sets us free from fear. Truth doesn't guarantee bad things won't happen, but it does promise to always prevail in the end. It has no shadows where darkness can hide. With truth comes love, and we could use that right now. My vote to impeach our sitting president is not a fear-based decision. I am not choosing a side, I'm choosing truth. It's the only way to defeat fear.
I cannot think of a more petty, vindictive, and gratuitous act than to impeach an already defeated president a week before he is to leave office. President-elect Biden's promise to heal the nation becomes a hollow mockery in the harsh reality of this unconstitutional act. God help our country.
Has expired.
Yeah, Tommy.
In the first impeachment, Republicans said we didn't need to impeach him because he learned his lesson, so no need to remove him. Well, we said if we didn't remove him, he would do it again.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Simply put, we told you so.
The gentleman's time has expired.
Richmond out.
All legal challenges have been exhausted. Congress has certified electors over objections, and Joe Biden will be the next president of the United States. President Trump has indicated he will peacefully transfer power to President-elect Biden next week. So why pursue impeachment just 1 week before he leaves office?
They sought above all else to seize control of our government in the name of Donald Trump. Let that sink in. The terrorists who stormed this building planned to hang the vice president, kill the speaker, and topple our government. They took down the American flag and replaced it with a Trump flag.
The left in America has incited far more political violence than the right. For months, our cities burned, police stations burned, our businesses were shattered, and they said nothing. Or they cheerled for it, and they fundraised for it, and they allowed it to happen in the greatest country in the world. Now, some have cited the metaphor that the president lit the flame. Well, they lit actual flames, actual fires, and we put them out.
Expired. There will be order in the House.
I yield back.
We have a mandate to legislate in defense of Black lives. The first step in that process is to root out white supremacy, starting with impeaching the...
Joining me now, NBC News legal analyst Glenn Kirshner, presidential historian and NBC News political analyst Jonathan Alter, and Washington Post political reporter Eugene Scott. Jonathan, we are in uncharted territory here. Trump, the first president to be impeached twice. About this time last year, Congressman Adam Schiff put out a warning that now seems eerily accurate. Listen to this.
When the president tries to coerce an ally to help him cheat in our elections and then covers it up, we must say enough. Enough. He has betrayed our national security, and he will do so again. He has compromised our elections, and he will do so again. You will not change him. You cannot constrain him. He is who he is. Truth matters little to him. What's right matters even less, and decency matters not at all for a man like Donald J. Trump. They gave you a remedy, and they meant for you to use it. They gave you an oath, and they meant for you to observe it. We have proven Donald Trump guilty. Now do impartial justice and convict him.
All right, that was almost a year ago. Now listen to what Schiff had to say today.
1 week ago, the president incited an insurrection against Congress to prevent the peaceful transition of power. It was the most dangerous moment for our democracy in a century. Today, we invoke the remedy the founders provided for just such a lawless president, impeachment.
The most dangerous moment for our country in a century. Jonathan, can you put today into historical context?
Well, Donald Trump now accounts for half of all of the presidential impeachments in American history. Andrew Johnson was impeached in 1868. Bill Clinton was impeached in 1998. Richard Nixon resigned before he could be impeached. And then you have Trump now with 2 impeachments. And I think the prescience that Adam Schiff showed testifies to the idea that character is destiny. If the Senate had listened to Adam Schiff and the other impeachment managers a year ago, we would not have had this terrorist attack on our Capitol. And I applaud the 10 Republicans who stood up. I think they will be viewed favorably by history. But 197 Republicans are at odds with what will assuredly be the historical verdict on our times. They are on the wrong side of history. That's something they're going to have to live with when they try to explain it to their grandchildren. And by the way, I don't think it's going to do them a lot of good politically. I think they're going to find that their constituents in the years ahead are not glad that they stuck by this malignant criminal and arguably traitor who has been president of the United States.
Glenn, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said that the rioters at the Capitol were sent to D.C. by the president. Take a listen.
Those insurrectionists were not patriots. They were not part of a political base to be catered to and managed. They were domestic terrorists, and justice must prevail. But they did not appear out of a vacuum. They were sent here by the president with words such as a cry to fight like hell.
Glenn, outside of Congress, the D.C. Attorney General is also looking at whether President Trump incited violence. Is it possible that he could be facing other legal consequences once he leaves office besides this Senate trial?
Sure, he could be facing prosecution, and there's already an investigation underway by my former office, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia. Allison, we saw a press conference yesterday by, unfortunately, 2 relatively low-level federal officials, the assistant director in charge of the FBI Washington field office and the U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia, recognizing he is one of 94 U.S. attorneys nationwide. But the one thing that caught my attention was when the U.S. attorney, acting U.S. attorney Tim Sherwin, yesterday said that my former office is not only using its national security division, which would be the appropriate group of prosecutors to investigate the national security crimes that unfolded or were committed at the Capitol on January 6th. But importantly, he said he has also organized a strike force of public corruption prosecutors to be part of the criminal investigation, and if the evidence supports it, prosecutions on the public corruption front. Well, when we involve our public corruption prosecutors, that tells me that there is potential criminal liability from government officials, because that is who those prosecutors investigate and try to hold to account.
So, Glenn, let me ask you this. President Trump released a statement today reading, quote, "In light of reports of more demonstrations, I urge that there must be no violence, no law breaking, and no vandalism of any kind." Could that statement help him at all if he is charged after leaving office, or is this simply too little too late?
That doesn't help him even a little bit, Allison. I think what people don't always recognize is that Donald Trump launched this attack. He pointed his supporters in the direction of the Capitol and said, go. And he did that from a place of a false premise that the election had been stolen from him. Often it is a challenge for prosecutors to prove corrupt intent or criminal mens rea, guilty state of mind. In this case, not so much, because Donald Trump launched this attack from a place of fraud. And Allison, it is no excuse or defense for him to say, well, I thought there was election fraud. If I walked into your house, Allison, and I took your TV and I walked out with it and I said, well, I thought it was my TV. Guess what? That ain't a defense.
Yeah, and I'd still want my TV back, that's for sure, Glenn. Eugene, there is a petition to oust Liz Cheney from Republican leadership after she said yesterday she would vote to impeach the president, which of course she did. Cheney says, though, she is not going anywhere. NBC News national political reporter Sahil Kapoor is saying that the Trump impeachment...
What we have seen so far in the response to Liz Cheney, led by some Republican lawmakers like Jim Jordan, is that some of these individuals who spoke see that this group of lawmakers still cannot get past Trump, even when he leaves the White House, because he will remain one of the most influential people in the Republican Party. Days after the Capitol riots, Quinnipiac University poll revealed that more than 70% of Republicans give Trump job approval, think very highly of him. And so and he's in the hearts of the voters, and they are going to want to see policies and ideas that reflect that.
So, Eugene, let's talk about the Democrats. Mitch McConnell says the Senate won't start its trial before President-elect Biden takes office. How will an impeachment trial at the start of Joe Biden's term potentially affect his administration and the Democrats' agenda?
If the Democrats are not specific and struggling economically and find a better rollout plan for the vaccines in response to coronavirus, the Democrats will have a hard time moving into 2022 when it comes time for midterm elections, because Republicans will argue that they were consumed with trying to impeach Donald Trump, and that could mobilize some GOP voters. However, many Democrats, despite wanting to see relief because of the economy and wanting to see a response to the pandemic, also want to see President Trump held accountable for not only his actions last week influencing the riots, but for many things he did over the past 4 years that led them to believe that he was unfit and moved them to vote against him last November.
Jonathan, impeachment scholars Brian C. Colt and Frank Bowman write in the Washington Post about the historical precedent for what they are calling late impeachability, convicting a president after danger to constitutional order such a person might pose if readmitted to the government in the future. What is your take on the historical precedent for late impeachability?
I think it's very clear that they made a very good case, and other constitutional scholars have as well. The thing to understand historically is that in 1789 at the Constitutional Convention, in real time, that very year in England, after he was no longer governor. And remember, the framers of our Constitution, they looked to England much in their deliberation. So it's clear that the original intent was to allow for trial after the person had left office. It happened again in 1798 when a senator tried to steal Florida back for the British. And after he left the Senate, he was tried by his former colleagues. Precedent for late impeachments and late Senate trials. I don't think there's any question about that.
So, Glenn, let me ask you this. To impeach the president is one thing, but this is a president who very recently, we know, was considering making an announcement that he was going to run again in 2024. So there is concern now, talk now about what needs to happen to prevent him from being able to hold office again. What do we know about that, about the law here with regards to President Trump being able to run for president again once he's impeached?
Well, he will be able to run for president again unless he is impeached, he's convicted, and the Senate votes to prohibit him from ever holding public office in the future. But I have to say, Allison, I am firmly convinced that he will become a criminal defendant. I suspect New York State is perhaps ready to charge him criminally. One of the biggest indicators that the New York District Attorney, Cy Vance, is moving toward indicting Donald Trump is recently it was reported that he hired a bunch of really expensive forensic accountants. And I can tell you as a former prosecutor, when you're investigating a case, you don't start to hire really expensive forensic experts if you're moving away from a criminal charge, only if you are moving toward a criminal charge and a trial. So not only that, but I think he could be charged federally, and I think he should be charged federally, especially if he grants himself a pardon, because that will have to be tested. A self-pardon cannot be allowed to stand as atmospheric precedent if a president grants himself a pardon.
Eugene, let me ask you then, many people would have said that last Wednesday that the president's political future became very, very dim after the Capitol riots. But we certainly know that this is a president who doesn't always see perhaps the loss, who doesn't always make the concession when other people think it might be appropriate or that time has come and gone. What is your sense about the president's political future and the Republican Party, not only as we talked about bringing itself back together because it is clearly splintered right now, but breaking itself from President Trump and Trumpism, if you will?
I believe the future for the president, the political future for him, is dependent upon what the Senate allows after a political future legally. And I think what that would also communicate to other Republicans who are interested in higher office is that if they behave in ways similar to President Trump, there will be repercussions and consequences. The reality is that the president has millions of dollars in debt that will be due in a couple of years. And that probably is more of a priority for him than anything else, finding a way to monetize his presidency so that he can be in a better financial situation. But that doesn't mean his political future will be over all across the board. He could still find some way to remain influential, perhaps in conservative media, somehow find his way being a kingmaker, maybe a PAC. It's not really clear. But in terms of being able to actually be in the White House as president of the United States, that is going to depend on what we see happening after Biden's inauguration when the Senate considers this impeachment.
It just seems like such a crazy thing to be even considering. I can't remember talk in in decades at least of a president who was not reelected considering another term. Jonathan, can you offer any sort of historical perspective here, as you are far more the expert than I am, of if we have had conversations? I know we've never had conversations surrounding a president who's been impeached twice, but talk of a president thinking that he still had a political future once he was voted out?
Well, Grover Cleveland was voted out. He was succeeded by Benjamin Harrison, and then 4 years later, he came back. So the order goes Grover Cleveland, Benjamin Harrison, Grover Cleveland again. So it is possible. And actually, Herbert Hoover, who got thumped by Franklin Roosevelt in 1932, he was a candidate for the Republican nomination in 1936. He didn't make it, and it's kind of hard to believe now. So you really, in politics, you can't rule anything out. And the intensity of Trump's support suggests that he continues to be, a real threat. I think that it's something that needs to be taken seriously as part of this Senate trial, because the country must be protected from this man. So they need to either have a conviction, which would prevent him from being in public office again, or what they're calling a 14th Amendment solution. The 14th Amendment, Section 3, has a provision for preventing anyone who engaged in insurrection from holding public office. This was ratified after the Civil War and used to prevent former Confederates from holding federal office. And it can be applied by majority vote. So there are some other options. This would have to work its way through the legal system, but there are some other options for barring him from holding public office.
All right, I'm going to ask our panel to stick around. Thank you so much for your insight so far. We will be coming back to you. In the meantime, you are looking at live pictures of the United States Capitol. We're going to bring you back to those. We're any minute now. We are expecting House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. There it is. We will, of course, bring that live to you as soon as it gets started. Meanwhile, as we have been saying, this is a presidency like no other. The House voting to impeach President Trump for a second time today. The unprecedented move coming 7 days before he leaves office, 10 Republicans breaking ranks and voting to impeach the president. NBC News national political reporter Sahil Kapoor joins me now. Sahil, you have been watching this develop for about a week now. What stood out to you most about today's vote and today's proceedings?
Well, the big question coming into this, Allison, was how many Republicans would break ranks and vote to impeach President Trump. And it turns out 10 of them did. And that's a very significant number. I don't believe any of the previous 3 impeachments in American history have had that level of support from the president's party to impeach him. So that's significant. And the most notable name on that list, of course, was Liz Cheney, the 3rd ranked House Republican, a member of the party's leadership who voted to impeach President Trump. She said his betrayal was unprecedented. And it was, in her words, a grave betrayal of his oath of office and of the Constitution. That probably stood out the most to me because that's the kind of thing that will get other Republicans who are sitting in the Senate now wondering how to vote on conviction to consider and to look at the kind of Republicans across the spectrum who decided to vote to impeach President Trump.
Before the vote today, Sahil, Democratic Congressman Seth Moulton responded to criticism from Republicans about a second impeachment. Here he is.
I don't revel in this. This is a sad day for me as an American patriot. I'm a Democrat, but I'm an American first. And this is not what I came to Congress to do. We're not impeaching Donald Trump because we want to do it. We're impeaching him because of what he did. And it's unfathomable.
Sal, as we've said, 10 House Republicans voting with the Democrats today. Do you get the sense that this impeachment push is even more serious than the first one?
Yes. The first impeachment of President Trump was on obstruction of Congress and abuse of power, things that, are not completely unprecedented, but incitement of insurrection against the United States government is not something that presidents are typically accused of. That's highly unusual. That's highly remarkable. And that's the kind of thing that made Democrats believe that they couldn't sit idly by and not use their constitutional authority to respond to this. Now, there has been division among Democrats because they are doing this at a cost. They will likely have to sacrifice a little bit of President-elect Biden's early days by holding a trial in the Senate, which could prevent the new Democratic-led Senate from quickly confirming his nominees or bringing up legislation. I see Speaker Pelosi walking in here.
All right, Sal, I'm going to have to pause you right. Yep, there she is. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is getting ready to speak after the House voted 232 to 197 to impeach President Trump a second time. Here she is.
Good evening, everyone. It is my honor to be here with members of the House leadership, Leader Hoyer, Whip Clyburn, Assistant Speaker Catherine Clark, also with our managers for the impeachment, our lead manager, Jamie Raskin, Diana DeGette, David Cicilline, Joaquin Castro, Eric Swalwell, Madeline Dean, and Joe Neguse. I think Ted Lieu and Stacey Pascal are in here electronically one way or another, but we're very proud that they have accepted the responsibility, a responsibility we did not think 1 week ago we would have. Today, in a bipartisan way, the House demonstrated that no one is above the law, not even the President of the United States. That Donald Trump is a clear and present danger to our country, and that once again, we honored our oath of office to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. So help us God. And now, I sadly, and with a heart broken over what this means to our country, of a president who would incite insurrection, will sign the engrossment of the article of impeachment.
Speaker Pelosi, are you disappointed that Leader McConnell said that he will not hold his trial until the 19th? Speaker Pelosi, how long do you think the trial will last?
When do you plan to sign the paperwork for the Senate?
Response to McConnell tonight, Speaker Pelosi.
All right, let's go back to NBC News national political reporter Sahil Kapoor. Sahil, I'm sorry I had to interrupt you there, but obviously we knew the speaker was coming forward. We wanted to hear from her. Your reaction to what we saw there, the speaker saying her heart broken by what happened today.
Brief remarks here, Allison. It kind of speaks to what I was just mentioning a moment ago. This is not something that Democrats had in mind. They did not envision spending the last days of the Donald Trump presidency impeaching him for a second time, especially when the prospects of convicting him remain murky, to say the least, in the Senate right now, which is Republican-controlled, but will be 50-50 split in a matter of days, exactly 1 week from now, actually, I should say. So the trial is what comes next. What is needed to convict President Trump, make him the first president ever to be convicted in an impeachment trial in U.S. history, is at least 17 Republicans. That's what it would take to get 2/3 of the Senate if every Democrat goes along. Yeah. It's hard to count to 17. It's not impossible, but it would require a dam-breaking moment. And as my colleague Casey Hunt and I have been reporting, it would likely involve the support of either the explicit support of Senator McConnell, the Republican leader, or a clear signal from him to various members that they should go ahead and feel free to vote to to convict this president after he left office.
Sahil, you have some new reporting today on how impeachment could define the Republican Party's future. Let's talk about that. Where do you see the party going from here?
Well, it's certainly at a fork in the road, because the future of this party will, in some ways, be shaped by Donald Trump. The idea that he's going to go quietly into the night is not something that I find realistic. He still has a passionate following within the Republican Party. A Quinnipiac poll that was taken fully after the riots on Capitol Hill found that his job approval within the party is about 71%. That's a pretty high approval still, and the passions run deep, and the following is pretty intense, and he will still have a broad appeal and a pull with the Republican base. So it's not out of the question that Trump could try to run again in 2024. This arguably is the last best chance that Republican lawmakers have to make a clean break from the president, and that would likely require not only convicting him, but also adding a provision on here that bars this president from holding office again. The Senate has the power to do that, and if Republicans do that, that would instantly take him out of the picture for the next presidential primary in 2024, where he will undoubtedly be a factor. He'll either run again or he'll get to play kingmaker and kind of pick favorites and shape that primary. This is the opportunity that some critics of President Trump see to make a clean break from him, Allison.
Sahil, I have to ask you about something else getting a lot of attention on the Hill today. There are, of course, extra security measures in the Capitol after the riots last week, but several Republicans either skipped or ignored metal detectors, some of them expressing extreme discontent that they were there, doing that before today's vote. How are other lawmakers reacting to this? What are you hearing about this on the Hill?
It's a remarkable scene on the Hill. Usually members of the House of Representatives are able to walk on and off the floor freely. They don't have to deal with any kind of security measures because they have that special privilege. Now, after this extraordinary attack that we saw a week ago today on the Capitol, people are rattled and security measures have been intensified and lawmakers have to go through metal detectors. And there have been certain, shall we say, rebellious members, all of them Republicans that we're aware of, who are just kind of pushing and shoving their way through, who are going around the magnetometers, who are complaining that they have to wait in lines in order to get on the House floor. They don't want to do this. So it's a little bit of a Wild West situation on Capitol Hill in the House of Representatives as, the security force is trying to figure out how to keep the peace here. And the leadership of the House of Representatives, specifically Speaker Pelosi, is trying to keep the place secure.
Yeah, a really tough job these days, indeed. Sahil Kapoor, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Today. It is good to have you with us.
As we start a new year, we're right there with you to kick it off right.
Let's go 2021.
Stay healthy.
We're going to show you all the ways to keep calm and de-stress.
And stay connected every morning on Today.
Everybody, welcome to Today. It is good to have you with us.
As we start a new year, we're right there with you to kick it off right.
Let's go 2021.
Stay healthy.
We're going to show you all the ways to keep calm and de-stress.
And stay connected every morning on Today.
I'll tell you what the American people's mandate is. Heal the nation. It's why he ran. That is why he won. How close to the breaking point is our hospital system? Why should we feel confident that vaccine distribution will go smoothly? If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press.
The coronavirus exploding to staggering
President-elect
records.
Biden moves forward with his transition. What are your priorities going to be on those first days? With vaccinations ramping up.
How are you feeling?
Incredibly optimistic that we're at this point.
NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
You are watching NBC News Now. We've got some breaking news.
Trucks carrying the first U.S. shipment of the coronavirus vaccine. Hope for a whole lot of people who have been waiting months and months.
It's news made for your streaming world.
Are you ready?
Monday boost?
Are you ready for a boost?
How do you feel about that book?
We love those nurses. That was beautiful.
For breaking news in our changing world, download the NBC News app.
I didn't know, was my child dead? Is my child passed out?
I just kept saying, please be okay, please be okay.
You rush your child to the hospital.
A woman came in, normal clothes. We get down the hallway, and she closes the door. They were accusing me of child abuse.
And that's when the real nightmare begins.
Hey, calm down.
No, it's my children. I can't calm down.
Do No Harm. All 6 episodes, plus a special bonus episode, are available now. Subscribe for free wherever you get your podcasts.
We have been living in perpetual grief. The incomprehensible loss of life, shuttered businesses, the fabric of civility ripped apart. We found solace in our heroes. And now finally, we see what hope looks like. Our worst year is over. Thanks to science, defeating the virus appears to be in reach. How we heal the wounds left behind will define how history remembers not just the virus, but us.
This is a troubled time, a sad time.
It is a time where all of us have stood almost to a person and lamented the violence and the assault on this Capitol and the assault on democracy itself.
It's always been about getting the president, no matter what. It's an obsession that is now broadened. It's not just about impeachment anymore, it's about canceling, as I've said. And now with just 1 week left, they're still trying. In 7 days, there will be a peaceful transfer of power, just like there has been every other time in our country. But Democrats are going to impeach President Trump again.
We must do our constitutional duty once again. While the president failed in his attempt to upend our democracy last Wednesday's events, make clear that if we do not hold him accountable and remove him from power, a future attempt could very well be successful.
The president must be impeached, and I believe the president must be convicted by the Senate, a constitutional remedy that will ensure that the Republic will be safe from this man who was so resolutely determined to tear down the things that we hold dear and that hold us together.
I believe impeaching the president in such a short time frame would be a mistake. No investigations have been completed. No hearings have been held. But here is what a vote to impeach would do. A vote to impeach would further divide this nation. A vote to impeach will further fan the flames of partisan division.
He poses a continuing threat to our nation, to the integrity of our elections, and to our democratic order. He must not remain in power 1 moment longer. Not 1 moment longer. The danger is too great. We must impeach.
Emotions are still high, but in this moment, we need to be focused on toning down the rhetoric and helping heal this nation as we move towards a peaceful transition of power to President-elect Joe Biden next week.
On this vote, the ayes are 232, the nays are 197. The resolution is adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
Security in Washington, D.C. at levels we have not seen since 9/11. Thousands of armed National Guard troops patrolling the Capitol today while the House debated and voted on impeachment. Those troops also bracing for more potential violence in the days leading up to the inauguration. This morning, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi stepped outside during the impeachment proceedings to personally thank the troops for guarding the Capitol building. NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber joins me now from Capitol Hill. Ellison, you were reporting from the Capitol grounds last Wednesday during the riots. How does the security we are seeing today compare to what you saw there last week?
Allison, just a week ago, you could make your way all the way up to the Capitol, the front of the Capitol, and now you can see this place is essentially a fortress. There are these barricades, some 9 feet tall, surrounding all sides of the Capitol. They have these flat bases here, which make it nearly impossible for people to flip this over if they try. Behind these barricades, there are armed military members, National Guardsmen, surrounding every side of the United States Capitol. As of today, some 6,200 Guards members are in the nation's capital. They have deployed from 6 states as well as the District of Columbia. The Army General who oversees the National Guard, he says that they have gotten requests from the Secret Service, Park Police, as well as Capitol Police for assistance. And as of Monday, they have activated 15,000 Guard members. D.C.'s Chief of Police said earlier today that when all of this is said and done, he thinks that it is possible the National Guard will have a footprint within the D.C. area of upwards of 20,000 members of the National Guard. Allison?
Ellison, there'll be thousands of National Guard troops, all sorts of other law enforcement in D.C. for Inauguration Day. What else do we know about the security preps for the 20th and the couple of days leading up to it?
Yeah, right. Of course, there's all of the stuff that we can see. And then there's also a lot of things happening behind the scenes. The District of Columbia, they have actually asked the DOJ to authorize the FBI to give them daily intelligence and threat briefings leading up to Inauguration Day in D.C. The D.C. mayor has also asked people to stay home. She says if you wanted to celebrate the inauguration, do it virtually. She has also asked the Department of the Interior, the National Park Service, to cancel any First Amendment permits they may have issued or any others that could be coming between January 11th and the 24th. Those discussions are still ongoing, and they're a little bit tricky because one senior official I spoke with at the Department of the Interior said it's hard because they have issued First Amendment permits to the Presidential Inauguration Committee. So canceling some but then allowing others, that makes things a little tricky. There's also all of this. See these military trucks down here? Roads are blocked blocked off 2 and 3 blocks away from the United States Capitol, closing all of this area to any vehicular traffic. Just past these military trucks, there are police cars. You can't see them from this point, but they have their lights on where they're making sure people are not able to come through this area unless it's absolutely necessary. This part right here has been almost entirely closed to any sort of vehicular traffic. Allison?
All right, Ellison, it is just incredible to see what a difference a week makes in terms of security. Ellison Barber at the Capitol, thank you so much. President Trump's second impeachment looks very different than his first. For starters, the president doesn't have Twitter to respond to the proceedings in real time. And second, there's no apparent coordinated or aggressive defense from his White House or his allies. NBC News White House correspondent Kelly O'Donnell joining me now from Washington. Kelly, 10 Republican House members, as we know, voted to impeach President Trump today. How is the White House reacting to losing that support? And what are the concerns now about how Republicans might vote in the Senate?
Well, certainly there is a displeasure that there are so many Republican defectors, but you set it up in a way that is very descriptive of what's happening. There just really aren't allies in the president's orbit who are out publicly defending him. Nothing like what we saw in 2019 when he went through his first impeachment, where he had a defense team and vigorous arguments were being made, and allies who were on television and out in the community trying to defend the president in all sorts of ways. This has been very, very different, in part because of the nature of the allegations against the president, in part because we're near the end of his term and some of his allies have left his orbit. And so it's a stark difference. And the president, without the ability to communicate directly using his social media, is at a bit of a difference as well. The White House has put out a video that it made where the president denounces violence and says there should not be any more political violence. He does not speak directly to the issue of impeachment. Part of what's notable about this is the president has all the powers of his office until next week, and that includes the access to speak to the public directly through the White House media. And yet, he's not doing that, instead having an internal White House team, government employees, do a video for him and then putting it out, making it available. Now, normally they would just post that to Twitter. They did release it to the various networks, and then some of the allies of the president are certainly putting it out on their social media. But again, that's a president who's been accused of inciting insurrection, impeached by the House for it, and is not engaging with a free press. It is a sign of how much he is in a bunker and how much he does not want to deal with the normal conventions of his power and the tools of his office. So instead of independent journalists being able to observe what the president has to say and to be able to ask questions and so forth, he's put out a video message. That's very different than almost any kind of important address from a sitting president. You might see it for a campaign-related matter, but not official business like this, where the president is speaking in his capacity as president. Now, that doesn't change the words he chooses to use. In this case, he's saying he denounces violence. Of course, we saw last week the first video that they released, also done by the White House, House. The president talked about loving his supporters and that they are very special people, speaking to those who had gone to the Capitol. So a different tone from the president, not addressing impeachment directly, no official statement from the White House about his historic role as the only president ever impeached twice. Allison?
Kelly, outside of Washington, D.C., New York City saying that it is terminating its contracts with the Trump Organization. What is the Trump Organization saying about that move today?
Well, even that is starkly different because the Trump Organization has a statement and is responding, functioning in a business capacity where they are concerned about the revenue lost by New York taking this action for things that the Trump Organization owns, where the New York City taxpayers through contracts are paying rent and services to the Trump Organization. Things like the ice skating rink is one example. The Trump Organization says that the city does not have a legal ability to end these contracts, and they're calling it a political attack. And they argue that the city will still owe tens of millions of dollars to the Trump Organization because they are canceling these contracts without cause. So they will push back very severely about this. There's a lot at stake for the president, his family, and his organization when part of the president's identity has been so wrapped up in his wealth and his power through his organization. To have this kind of loss of revenue is certainly going to be painful to that and a threat to his viability. And it comes after we saw the PGA, as an example, withdrawing plans to host one of its important golf tournaments at the Bedminster Trump National Club. One of the prides of the Trump Organization is their ability to attract that kind of business. We've seen a hit on Trump business through his time in office. Now, very clearly, there are corporations and now cities like New York who are stepping away from the Trump brand. Allison?
Speaking of stepping away, Kelly, today was Hope Hicks' last day at the White House. Could you talk to us about her decision to leave right now?
Well, this is one of those important figures who had been with the president from his time in the Trump Organization through the 2016 campaign and through much of this term. She left for a period of time and then returned and has now left again. And this is not a specific statement about the events of the last week. We are told that she had planned to leave in advance of the inauguration. It's also true that in these final days, typically top officials, unless they have an immediate job they're going to, try to stay to help with the transition, to complete all the business of government. And many people inside the Trump White House who are less well known than Hope Hicks have also already moved on, making it harder for the Biden team and harder for the functions of government that need to continue over these next several days. Allison?
Kelly O'Donnell updating us on the Trump administration and the Trump Organization. Thank you so much. The FBI collected intel on potential threats of violence ahead of last week's Capitol riots, but never issued a formal intelligence bulletin to other law enforcement agencies. NBC News national security correspondent Ken Delanian explains why.
Allison, NBC News has some new reporting on what is increasingly looking like an intelligence failure that led up to the January 6th riots. You know, the FBI told us last week that they had no intelligence indicating that there was going to be anything other than a peaceful protest. Then that same official told reporters yesterday that, in fact, they did have intelligence and that they shared some of it with the Capitol Police. But Capitol Police officials, we are reporting today, told Congress that they were not They didn't see any such sharing by the FBI of any intelligence. That doesn't mean it didn't happen, but the top Capitol Police officials said they didn't see it and it wasn't a part of their plan. What's more, Allison, the FBI never put out what's known as a joint intelligence bulletin. The analysts within the FBI's intelligence branch didn't write up everything that they had gathered from social media postings and human sources around the country about the plans and intentions of extremists who wanted to march on, potentially attack the Capitol. They didn't write that up and distribute it to local law enforcement agencies, in part because, I am told, FBI lawyers were concerned that what this was actually First Amendment protected free speech, even though it was extremist, and that therefore the FBI had no business writing it up in an intelligence report. Well, some of my sources say that was a complete misjudgment. It led the Capitol Police to be woefully unprepared for the riot and the attack, including people who left pipe bombs outside the Capitol and people who were armed with lead pipes and flexicuffs and pepper spray. And thankfully, Allison, we're going to be asking a lot of questions about what went wrong here, but now the government appears to have completely pivoted, and the FBI is leaning forward and putting out intelligence reports about every possible threat. And the security presence around the Capitol is massive, led by the Secret Service. There are thousands of armed National Guard members. There's fencing. So if anything, the U.S. government is now overreacting to make sure that the inauguration and other events around Washington are secure. But there's going to be a lot of questions and hearings and investigations going forward about what went wrong leading up to that January 6th riot. What did the FBI know? What did they share? What did local police agencies know? Why weren't they better prepared? One thing is clear. It's very much like after 9/11.
While the House impeached President Trump for a second time, President-elect Joe Biden met with transition officials, added more members to his National Security Council, and nominated former UN Ambassador Samantha Power to head the U.S. Agency for International Development. NBC News correspondent Mike Memoli in Wilmington, Delaware. From the president-elect or vice president-elect?
No, Allison, I keep looking down at my phone because you would think have not received it yet. What the Biden team has sent out is some scheduling announcements about what we'll see tomorrow from the president-elect. He's going to be giving an address in prime time Thursday night about his economic recovery and his plan to vaccinate Americans. So what does this tell us, Allison? It tells us the future and not about what's happening in Congress right now. This has been their posture consistently. We've heard Biden ask several times about impeachment, saying that's up to Congress, obviously concerned about the impact it could have on his legislative agenda and really what he's been promising to try to do to bring this country together. Impeachment, as we've heard all day on the House floor, potentially only further dividing Americans. But at this stage, we haven't heard anything from the president-elect, likely to change at some point tonight. But just.
And it returns next Tuesday. That's the day before Joe Biden's inauguration. What are the transition's latest concerns about the potential timing of the Senate trial, what this could mean for their first 100 days?
Well, absolutely. Biden has been working the phones, talking to both Mitch McConnell, to Chuck Schumer in the afternoon, but have some confirmation votes in the morning on his his cabinet nominees. Interesting, though, we did get some news about noon that they will hold a confirmation hearing on Friday for Biden's nominee to be the Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines. The Biden team has really been pushing, especially this week, on the Senate to hold those confirmation hearings for his national security nominees, including as well his Defense Secretary nominee, Lloyd Austin, his Secretary, arguing that because of this unbelievable situation we've been encountering in Washington, this unique threat environment that we face, they need to have front some progress, Allison.
All right, Mike, let's get into today's staffing announcements. I know we said this last hour, but there were other things happening today besides the impeachment at the Power U.S. Aid Administrator. Could you tell us more about those?
For those who, follow the transition for who was the UN ambassador, who also previously served on the National Security Council, taking a step back as the head of USAID, overseeing all these aid programs run by especially the State Department. But it's a measure, the Biden team says, of just how important this program is to President-elect Joe Biden, that he's asking Power to do this. And as part of this announcement today, the position of USAID director is being elevated to a seat. I find interesting, not necessarily who he chose, but what he chose her for. Ann Neuberger is going to be the choice to serve as the Deputy National Security Advisor for Cyber and Emerging Threats. The Biden team of how much a priority this is.
Yeah, Mike, a new position and what seems like a very necessary one, given what you said. Mike Memoli, thank you so much for updating us on the Biden team. Republican lawmakers calling for unity while debating impeachment on the House floor today. Democratic lawmakers arguing the president must be impeached to hold him accountable for inciting violence. Take a look.
This is hardly the way the House should undertake such a serious act. Mr. Speaker, there's still a way to unite the country. Let us look forward, not backward. Let us come together, not apart. Let us celebrate the peaceful transition of power to a new president rather than impeaching an old president.
If inciting an insurrection does not warrant impeachment, nothing does.
In 7 days, there will be a peaceful transfer of power, just like there has been every other time in our country. But Democrats are going to impeach press of last week that we all condemn. And Republicans have been consistent. We've condemned all the violence all the time.
What eat by our children and their children. The facts are clear. The evidence of Trump's insurrection overwhelming. History calls on us to do what's right rather than just politically expedient.
Some of my Republican friends have been trying to lecture us about unity here today. Unity after they voted to overturn a free and fair election in the United States of America.
The votes are certified. President Trump has conceded. Let's focus on the future and get back to the people's business.
Last week on this very House floor, an attack on democracy, that symbol. But it was an attack from within. This very floor, let's be clear, cause and effect. Rally at the White House, march down Pennsylvania Avenue, a parade in reverse, and an attack to this chamber. A police officer was killed. And what I hear is time to heal. No one is above the law. Not the president if he has 4 years or 4 days. We must do the right thing for all Americans because he must be held accountable. I yield back.
I urge my colleagues to vote against this divisive impeachment and realize that dividing America will not save this republic. I urge my colleagues to not simply vote for what feels good. Of course, it feels good for the Democrats to have a united constituency for a few more days. But I was elected to come here and vote for things that actually to say, vote against impeachment. Vote in favor of a unified nation, and I will forsake partisanship and work with you, no matter who you are or what party you come from.
Let us condemn that which must be condemned and do so loudly. But let us do it the right way, with deliberation and without disastrous side effects. We must end tearing apart our nation by social media and sound bites. Let us stop. Let us debate. Let us sit down and lead this nation together.
I, too, urge my colleagues to unite, but to unite in love of country and to hold this president accountable. What unites our country is respect for the rule of law. Without accountability for those who would shatter the rule of law by overturning a presidential election, we cannot take seriously the cries of being a united people. This president remains a serious threat to our country and must be held accountable.
The gentlewoman's time has expired.
All right, let's go to our panel historian and NBC News political analyst Jonathan Alter and Washington Post reporter Jackie Alemany. Guy, Congressman Chip Roy said he believes
if the House approves the articles as written. The language will be used to target members of this body under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. It will be used to suggest that any statements we make are subject to review by our colleagues and send us down the perilous path of cleansing political speech in the public square.
Guy, what do you make of that response? Does this article of impeachment have political speech concerns?
I don't think it has political speech concerns. I think the question here is whether the president incited people to engage in rioting and insurrection. That's very different than making speeches on the House floor or the Senate floor. So I think that those are two very different things that we're talking about. Political speech considerations I don't think are at issue here, and so I don't think that's a relevant consideration in this particular context.
Jackie, Congressman Lee Zeldin said that President Trump should not be impeached because the Capitol attack was pre-planned. Take a listen.
We all know that this was a pre-planned attack. We all know that there was pipe bombs being discovered while the president was speaking. We all know that the Capitol perimeter was being breached during the president's speech. We know that this was pre-planned and it started while the president was speaking. Why is that not in the articles of impeachment?
Jackie, you tweeted today that you don't buy his explanation. Why not?
Yeah, well, look, Congressman Lee Zeldin basically is arguing that Trump is exculpated by the fact that the attack on the Capitol was premeditated, pre-planned. But presumably, if it was premeditated and pre-planned, which we know that it was, then the president should have had some idea that this was going to be playing out, which makes his actions potentially even more problematic and criminal, that he continued to encourage the mob to storm the Capitol and follow through and execute their plan. And even continued to encourage them as they were dragging and beating police and watched it on live television. Zeldin was one of the congressmen who doubled down on his defense of President Trump. I should note that he is close with President Trump's son, Donald Trump Jr. And I think this is a taste of the battle that you're going to see in the Republican Party as leaders grapple with the toxic legacy that President Trump has left behind, that at all costs, people are still going to defend this president if it's politically expeditious for them.
Jonathan, the impeachment today sets up a trial in the Senate. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell saying he will not agree to bring his senators back to D.C. before January 19th. That all but guarantees that this trial will take place once the president's term is over. Some experts say impeachment can only happen while a president is in office. Others say it doesn't matter. What does historical precedent tell us here?
The precedent is very clear. There are many precedents that, where people were impeached, left office, and then the Senate trial took place after they left office, including the British impeachment case that the founders were examining when they wrote that clause of the Constitution. So this isn't really an open question. There will be an impeachment trial in the U.S. Senate. I don't worry at all about it distracting from the Biden agenda. You know, Biden, as a former senator, understands it, as he puts it, you can bifurcate the Senate schedule. So you do the business of the new administration in the morning and the impeachment trial in the afternoon, or vice versa. They can walk and chew gum at the same time. It's going to be a very interesting trial because a lot of the evidence is only now coming out. And the reason that, free speech will not get Donald Trump off in this trial is that a lot of the case against him, it's now clear, is going to come down to what he did, or more precisely did not do, when the attack on the Capitol was underway. It was more than an hour before he even tweeted about it. And remember, we have video of the terrorists looking at their cell phones, trying to see, what is the president telling us to do? What should we do? If he had immediately, in the first minute, if he had tweeted, stop, pull back from the Capitol, what are you doing? This is nuts. Then he might have a better case in the Senate. But he's in a real tight jam on the facts in this particular case.
Guy, looking ahead to that Senate trial, some lawmakers want the president to be barred from ever running for public office again. But those two aren't exactly one and the same. How does that process work?
So it's a two-step process. So there'll be the trial, and if there's a conviction by 2/3 of the Senate, then the president will be removed. And then there's going to be another vote to determine whether he can hold federal office again. So both of those steps have to take place in order to make a determination whether he can hold public office again. So first, the question on conviction, and then the question of denying him the ability to hold federal office, including being able to run for president again.
Jackie, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy called Joe Biden the legitimate president today and urged his colleagues to work with the next administration. We've been talking about what will happen with House Republicans with that party. Will a statement like that be enough for House Republicans to follow his lead, perhaps for us to see a Congress that is a little more united than divided?
I don't think so, and it's certainly whiplash for those who have been following Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy closely, or Mod Kevin, as Trump has referred to him as, a pet nickname for a top ally in the Republican Party, who has really shown little daylight between him and the president. And that doing enough to distance himself because of Republicans losing all of their process, but that he has privately said he footsteps to that, and he's really been all over them enough to distance himself. Hate tweeting.
Say that presidents better understand their decisions.
The privilege of serving in public office in our democracy.
We have no confidence